Chapter 1. Boy Meets Girl. Good morning, and thanks for calling Jammin' Sportswear. This is Krickitt. When I called Jammin' that fall morning in 1992, I'd expected to be greeted by a bored-sounding customer service rep that would rather have been spending her morning doing anything other than answering a phone. But what I got was quite the opposite. When Krickitt said good morning, it sounded like she meant it. And she even sounded like a cricket, all chirpy and upbeat. "Hi, Krickitt," I answered her. "I'm Coach Kim Carpenter from New Mexico Highlands University. I'm calling about the baseball coaches' jackets in your catalog. I have loved baseball from the time I was a little kid. I could always see myself coaching someday, just like my dad. So when I got my first coaching job with the Highlands Cowboys in Las Vegas, New Mexico, it was a dream come true. But even dreams have their mundane moments, and so I found myself ordering jackets for my assistant coaches and myself. That first conversation with Krickitt was in no way the stuff movies are made of, but even so, as we discussed prices and colors, I got more and more interested in this telephone salesperson with a unique name. She was so refreshingly friendly and helpful that I couldn't help feeling like my day was better just from having spoken to her. Our conversation ended, but I couldn't stop thinking about this girl named Krickitt. There was just something different and special about her voice and personality that I really couldn't explain. I could tell this wasn't just a job for her. It was more like a mission. It was as if she had decided to be the friendliest, most helpful person her customers talked to every day. If that was the case, then she was a roaring success in my mind. I decided to call again a few days later to follow up on the order. "Good morning, and thanks for calling Jammin'. This is Carrie." Carrie. Not the voice I wanted to hear. I quickly had to face the fact that I was calling for a reason other than just checking up on those jackets. Carrie sounded like a nice woman, but the fact was that I wanted to talk to Krickitt. I had to make it happen, so I thought fast. "Hi, Carrie. I'm following up on an order with Krickitt." "Just a minute." I could feel my heart racing as I waited. "Hi, this is Krickitt. What can I do for you today?" "Hi, Krickitt. This is Coach Carpenter from Highlands University. I called about a jacket the other day." As Krickitt looked up my information, I had a few seconds to think. What was it about this Krickitt person that all of a sudden made me feel like I was a nervous, lovesick teenager? She was just a sales rep doing her job, and she was in California, not New Mexico, where I was. I pushed those thoughts aside as I asked her for some color samples before ending the conversation. When the samples arrived, I spread them out on a table. My thoughts started going in unexpected directions. Did she pick out these colors herself? Had she held the samples in her hands? Whoa there, settle down. I couldn't figure out what was happening to me, or why it was happening. I was a grown man, after all. I put those thoughts from my mind, yet I was unusually eager to talk to a certain telephone sales rep when I called again to order a purple and gray jacket. "Good morning, and thanks for calling Jammin'. This is Krickitt." Success. "Hi, Krickitt. It's Coach Carpenter. Coach Carpenter!" She interrupted with a sense of excitement that surprised me, since she knew I was going to be ordering a grand total of one jacket from her. "It's great to hear from you again." I wondered what she thought was great about it. Was it the prospect of another order, or was it because it was me? I tried to determine if I could sense more than a professional friendliness in the sound of that voice I couldn't get out of my head. Unsurprisingly, I ordered the jacket. Then I ordered another one in a different style. When it arrived, it was so popular amongst the staff that every coach on the team wanted one, so I ordered some more. A few months had passed since that first conversation with my favorite salesperson, and by now we spent a lot more time just talking to each other than actually conducting business. Then one day, at the end of a call, Krickitt mentioned she wouldn't be working on the day I had been planning to call to check on an order, so she gave me her home number. After that, I started calling Krickitt at her apartment, and before long, we stopped pretending the calls were about athletic clothing and spent the time getting to know each other. We often talked for more than an hour. No matter how long we talked, we never wanted to hang up the phone, even when my phone bill rocketed up from almost nothing to $500 a month. Those were the days before email and texting, and few people even had cell phones. Krickitt and I were tied to landlines, but I didn't care about the inconvenience or the expense. She was more than worth it. I finally found out the story behind Krickitt's unique name. Her given name was Chris-Ann, a name that reflected her Greek ancestry. The nickname Krickitt was coined when her great-aunt declared the 2-year-old Chris-Ann could never sit still and hopped around all the time like a cricket. It was no surprise to anyone that Krickitt was energetic and athletic. Her dad had once coached high school basketball and baseball. Her mother coached gymnastics, which Krickitt had taken a liking to from the time she was old enough to make her way down a balance beam. In fact, she learned how to do a back handspring before she knew how to write her name. I thought I was a sports fanatic, but Krickitt put me to shame. From kindergarten on, she practiced gymnastics every day after school in her mom's gym, and she put in 5 hours a day during the summers. At 16, she tore the rotator cuff in her right shoulder, but her orthopedic surgeon told her an operation would probably kill her chances for a college scholarship. So she suffered through and just kept at it, excelling in floor exercises and the balance beam. She didn't let a little pain stop her. It was no surprise that Krickitt got multiple scholarship offers from schools with reputable gymnastics programs. She ended up choosing California State University at Fullerton, which had offered her a full gymnastics scholarship. She was a 2-time academic All-American there, before giving up competition after she tore her anterior cruciate ligament, ACL, during her senior year. Though many of our initial conversations were about sports, Krickitt wasted no time getting to the spiritual part of our relationship. A few months into our friendship, she wrote this: "You said I can ask you anything, so I must be honest, Kimmer. You know that I'm a Christian. Being a Christian is having an ongoing intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. I guess what I have been wondering this whole time is if you were a Christian too. If you had made the decision to ask Christ into your life to pay the penalty for your sin and give you eternal life like He has promised if we ask." Her faith was her life, and no matter what else she thought about me, she had to have a peace about my spiritual side before she could have any sort of relationship with me. As we talked through this part of our lives, we learned we were both Christians and had discovered Christ at the same age, but from that point our spiritual journeys had gone in different directions. I was 14 years old when I first learned about Jesus while at a friend's house. When I heard that Christ had died for me so my sins could be forgiven, it was the most awesome news I'd ever heard. I was so excited that I couldn't wait to get home to tell my parents about it. But when I started telling them what I felt, it didn't click with them at all. My parents were nominal churchgoers, but I don't think they had ever felt what I was feeling at that moment. We had never gone to Mass regularly, although Grandma Helen took us when she had the chance. As a family, we never talked about religion. But the message of Christ had touched me. It wasn't a quick process, but in time, I came to fully trust and follow Jesus as my Savior. Krickitt learned about Jesus from a little booklet called The 4 Spiritual Laws. Its message filled her with excitement and curiosity, and she decided then and there that she would commit her life to following Christ. But no one else knew she made that life-altering decision on that day. She didn't even totally know, at the time, what that decision would mean for her life, and for eternity. She didn't confirm her decision with anyone, and didn't get involved in church programs at the time. When she started college, she finally got involved in a church, the Evangelical Free Church in Fullerton. While there, her spiritual life transformed through the teachings of Pastor Charles Swindoll and college pastor Steve McCracken. During the summer of 1991, Steve led a mission trip to Hungary. Since Krickitt had just blown out her knee, she suddenly had time on her hands after years of daily workouts. When she heard about the Hungary trip, she saw it as a God-given opportunity to pour all the time and energy she had always put into gymnastics into something else. So she and her friend, and later roommate, Megan Almquist, took on the challenge of being missionaries for 9 weeks that summer. They had the incredible opportunity of spending time with and talking to people who were starved for Jesus' message of hope after generations of religious oppression. I thought I was pretty faithful, but when I saw how Krickitt lived her life, I was amazed. She had incorporated her faith into every part of her life. She wasn't a Christian just on Sunday mornings. Being a Christian was the core of who she was, and I adored that about her. My conversations with Krickitt kept getting longer and more involved. We also started writing letters back and forth. The letters were like the phone calls. We sent short cards at first, but it wasn't long before Krickitt was writing me 10 pages at a time. I can only imagine the length and number of emails we would have exchanged if we'd had that option in those days. As is the case in any fledgling relationship, it was inevitable that we would eventually talk about the idea of swapping pictures of ourselves, and early in the spring of 1993 we decided it was time to take that step. We couldn't send photos at the click of a mouse back then. Instead, we were looking at a long, nerve-wracking process of waiting for the mail to arrive each day. I mailed Krickitt a Highlands Cowboys media guide with my picture in it. Then I waited impatiently for a photo that would put a face to the amazing girl I'd gotten to know so well over the past few months. I tried to convince myself I was just interested in her heart and her spirit, but at the same time, I figured it couldn't hurt if she also happened to be beautiful. When the envelope from Krickitt arrived a few days later, I ripped it open and took my first look at a woman with dark hair, shining blue eyes, and a fantastic smile. I thought she was absolutely gorgeous. However, it was obvious there had been another person in the picture, as I could see an arm around Krickitt's shoulder. Who had she cut out of the photo? Was it her boyfriend? Another special friend like me? My heart plummeted as I considered that option. Take it easy, man, I chided myself. You're getting way ahead of yourself. I was dying to call Krickitt to see if she'd gotten any pictures that day too, but I was a bit nervous about how she might respond. That night I called to ask. Got it, she answered. I didn't want to ask what she thought, so I just waited to see if she'd tell me. She did. And I thought, this guy is even cute. We both laughed. I had been afraid the conversation would be tense and awkward, but thankfully it wasn't. I mentioned that I had noticed she had cropped someone out of the picture she sent me. Yeah, she responded. Again, I waited, halfway dreading what I might hear. I cut my girlfriends out because they're beautiful. We both knew what the next step would be, meeting in person. This would be a vitally important step in our relationship. After all, how do you know you truly connect with someone until you've physically spent time with him or her? So in February of 1993, Krickitt and I started talking about the prospect of meeting and spending some time together, short though a trip might be due to our work schedules. By that point, we were talking more than 5 hours a week, and I figured a plane ticket wouldn't cost much more than what I was spending on phone bills. So I asked Krickitt if she'd like to come to Las Vegas and see my team play a few games. She said she didn't know. Before she decided, she would have to think and pray about it. And she did think and pray. Years later, when Krickitt allowed me to read her journal from that time, I saw the evidence of it. One entry reads, "Lord, I really need your wisdom and spirit to guide me with Kimmer. Part of me wants to meet him. I think it would be fun. Part of me doesn't because I don't want to begin to have feelings for him if this is not of you. If it is, I pray you would show me that. I want to be led by you. I see so many ways in which we relate, but you must be the center." Eventually, Krickitt leveled with me about her concerns in a lengthy letter. In a nutshell, she wanted to make sure we had no unrealistic expectations about the visit. She made it clear that, at that point, we were just friends. Her other concern was she didn't want to jeopardize my reputation in any way. As a coach and role model, I had a lot to lose if the situation looked to be something other than what it was, two friends meeting each other. After 2 months of talking about it, Krickitt made the decision to come to New Mexico so we could meet face to face. In preparation for her arrival, I reserved a room at a hotel for her near my apartment. I fully respected that Krickitt was saving herself for her husband one day. I realized that since I had fallen short, I would have to be up front with her about my past, knowing that it would disappoint her. I knew also how important this was, and I wanted to make sure that it was quite clear to anyone who might be watching that we were not spending the night together. I made the 2-hour trip to Albuquerque to pick her up at the airport. In those pre-9/11 days, there were no restrictions on who could go through the security checkpoints at airports, so I was able to meet her at the gate. I spotted her the second she emerged from the jetway. I had seen her picture, so I knew who to look for, but I think I could have picked her out of the crowd even if I hadn't known what she looked like. I felt we had so much in common and had such a wonderful friendship already. Even though I already knew she was very attractive, when I finally saw her in the flesh, I could hardly believe how beautiful she was. After all those hours on the plane, I finally had a real live person to match with that amazing voice. Once we finally didn't have to worry about an astronomical phone bill, we talked almost non-stop all weekend. That first evening, we talked about everything: our childhoods, our families, our jobs, our love of sports, our friends, and our incredible long-distance friendship. But more than anything else, we talked about our faith. I already knew she was much more mature in her faith than I was, but I soon discovered that she didn't feel like she was superior to me. Instead, she encouraged me to get to know God better and to follow Him completely. She was so confident in who she was and in who God is. After many hours, we both stopped to catch our breath at the same time. In the silence, Krickitt glanced out the window. I saw astonishment on her face as she pointed at something outside. I turned to look and discovered that the sun had already risen. We had talked all night without realizing it. The next day, Krickitt attended the Cowboys doubleheader, and both games were 1-run losses. That evening, after the games, we talked again. I wasn't in an especially happy mood after the results of the day's games, and I got even more depressed while I told Krickitt about my mother, who was going through a serious illness. Yet, for some reason, I opened up to Krickitt in a way I never had with anyone else. I was amazed that she understood me and sympathized with me in a way I'd never felt before, and I knew then that this was something special. She wanted to know about my fears and challenges, and I wanted to discover the same about her. I was surprised when Krickitt suddenly handed me a present. I opened the box, revealing a beautiful new Bible with my name embossed on it in gold lettering. I didn't know what to say. By the time I could mumble a thanks, Krickitt was already turning to the book of Job. "Life isn't fair. It's life," she said softly, confidently. "Everybody has times when they feel like God's just not there. But He's always there, always bringing you closer to Him. Even when your mother's sick and your baseball team isn't playing well." Krickitt started to read. "In the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright." After a while, she stopped reading, and we talked about the terrible situations Job had to deal with. We asked the questions everyone asks about the man who lost everything. How could God allow such awful things to happen to such a good man? And perhaps more important from a human standpoint, why didn't Job throw in the towel and turn his back on God? We took turns reading about Job, and we talked about many things as the hours passed, and we delved into the incredible story of one man's faith in God in the midst of unimaginable tragedy. When we got to the end of the story, we rejoiced with Job as God richly rewarded his faith. Sometime in the middle of the night, we both fell asleep on the couch. The next day, Krickitt flew back to California, and I had a hard time not falling asleep while coaching third base. I later learned that when Crickett's roommate Lisa dropped her off at the airport at the beginning of the weekend, she told Krickitt she felt like she was somehow saying goodbye to her for good. Then, when Lisa picked her up at the end of the weekend, it was obvious to Lisa that it was only a matter of time before her roommate would be moving out. There's no doubt we both had friends who whispered about our spending the weekend together, especially as Krickitt never slept in her hotel room. But we both knew that nothing happened that weekend, that we wouldn't want to tell our mothers. Our time together had been so exhilarating, exciting, and amazing, yet all weekend, I hadn't even kissed her. Believe it or not, I never even tried to. That wasn't what the weekend had been about. When I checked my mailbox a couple of days after Krickitt left, I found a thank you card. It was so beautiful it made me miss her more than I already did. I was struck by the way she wrote with such conviction, and how my own feelings mirrored her own. This is what she wrote. Kimmo, I think back over this weekend, and it was filled with so much laughter and tears. It was truly wonderful. I would never have imagined that we would be so compatible together. I enjoyed getting to know you this weekend. I feel so special to have seen who the real Kim Carpenter is. You have a heart that is so beautiful to me. Your loving kindness, gentleness, humility, craziness, and uniqueness completely blew me away. The way you have opened up to me and trusted me with who you are and what you have been through means so much to me. I, too, am blown away by some of the things we have talked about. I prayed so much for our weekend together, that we would enjoy one another's company and have quality conversations. Well, I guess you answered that one, huh? I have many questions and wonders with us. I'm curious to know what is going to happen. I'm ready to go with this relationship and see where it is going to go. It's not in our hands, Kimmer. I think we can go forward. I'm scared, but risk is part of love. I feel that the Lord is either going to continue to open the doors for us, or He will shut them. I'm placing this in His hands and trusting Him. Thank you for treating me so kindly and making me feel so special and adored. Kim Carpenter, I adore and cherish you. All my love, Krickitt. Philippians 4, 6-9. 6 through 9. Read and dwell on this. 6 through 9. Read and dwell on this. 6 through 9. 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 6 through The week after Krickitt returned home, we talked every day on the phone. We just couldn't get enough of each other. The next weekend, I had some time off, and Krickitt quickly accepted my invitation for another visit. We spent the time talking, hiking, and four-wheeling up in the mountains. I had a recruiting trip to San Diego a few weeks later, and I couldn't resist combining it with a visit to Krickitt in Anaheim. While I was there, she introduced me to her parents, her brother and sister-in-law, and some of her friends. They were all so kind and welcoming. Her father, Gus, and I hit it off right away. That wasn't surprising, as our baseball connection created an instant bond. I went to church with Krickitt and discovered that her pastor, Charles Swindoll, was an incredible preacher whose passion for God was powerful and compelling. Going to church with Krickitt gave me yet another glimpse into who she really was as a person and as a Christian. The more I understood about her faith, the more I understood about her, and vice versa. I returned to California in late May, but not without some apprehension. Krickitt and I had some serious questions to answer. Our feelings for each other were obviously deep and genuine, but were we truly in love in a way that was leading toward marriage? I felt so much love for her, but I wanted to love her for all the right reasons and with all the right intentions. We went out for dinner and then took a walk on the beach at Del Mar. It was nothing like our usual interactions, when we would talk about anything and everything for hours. This conversation was punctuated by long periods of silence. We knew the significance of this conversation, and that every word was special and important. There was no doubt we needed to make a decision about the future of our relationship. I couldn't imagine not having Krickitt in my life from that moment forward, and I hoped she felt the same way I did. But we had jobs and families hundreds of miles apart. It had only been 8 weeks since we had met each other in person. Could we already be so sure we were ready to spend the rest of our lives together? There were times that night when I thought we would have to end our relationship. It couldn't stay like it was. We could either go forward or we could end it. Should we go our separate ways now before we got in too deep emotionally? Or was it already too late for that? Should one of us move? Should Krickitt quit her job? Should I quit mine? We had to decide, but it took us a while to work through everything as we walked hand in hand along the beach. Eventually, one of us brought up the idea of marriage, not in an excited or emotional way, but in a strangely calm way, as though it were one logical possible outcome of our relationship. We both agreed that it was where we wanted the relationship to head. But even though we decided that's what we wanted, it wasn't a done deal. Krickitt told me I would have to ask her father for her hand in marriage. At the time, Mr. and Mrs. Pappas were in Omaha, Nebraska for the College Baseball World Series. I didn't want to have to wait until they returned home, so I called them at their hotel. Even though I had met Krickitt's parents and we got along well, I was, like any man in the same situation, very nervous about this most important conversation. When Gus answered the phone, we exchanged some small talk and then talked about baseball for a few minutes. Finally, I took a deep breath and dove into the real purpose for the call. Krickitt and I have been getting along really well. I want to ask her to marry me, but she said I had to talk to you first. She did she? Yes, sir. Kim, we'd be honored to have you as our son-in-law. I was determined that the proposal would be creative. After I bought a diamond ring, I called Krickitt's roommates, Megan and Lisa, to help me set the stage for my visit. Their apartment had a security gate, and my plan was for one of the other girls to answer the buzzer so I could surprise Krickitt. They were happy to play along and easily got me inside the apartment complex without Krickitt finding out. I showed up outside their apartment in a suit and tie, despite my usual aversion to dress clothes. Then I started yelling Krickitt's name. She soon came out onto her balcony, a modern-day Juliet in shorts and Nikes. I was holding flowers, a teddy bear with balloons tied to it, and a ring box. The unusual sight struck her speechless, but only for an instant. "What are you doing here?" she yelled down at me. "Well, will ya?" I shouted back. My heart dropped as she disappeared from the balcony, but it was only a second before I could see her flying down the stairs toward me. "Will I what?" she asked expectantly. I got down on one knee, looked her in the eye, and asked her the most important question of my life. "Will you be my lifetime buddy? Chris-Ann, will you marry me?" Krickitt took a quick breath and said the words I knew would come, but was still dying to hear. "Yes, I will." After embracing, we stood back away from each other, and after a pause asked, "Now what do we do?" My original plan was that we'd get married the following spring. Krickitt admitted she didn't want to wait that long. I agreed with her thinking, so I tossed out a nearer date. Christmas. That was still too far off for her. So we set September 18th, barely 3 months away, as the day we would become husband and wife. I went back to Las Vegas to get the apartment ready for my future wife, and Krickitt jumped headfirst into wedding planning. She began making long-distance arrangements from Anaheim for a ceremony at Scottsdale Bible Church in suburban Phoenix, near her parents' home. So on the evening of September 18th, 1993, a perfect late summer desert night, I stood at the altar with an audience of more than 100 friends, family, and guests, held Crickitt's hand in mine, and made a vow. "Chris-Ann, I've grown to love you very much. I thank you for loving me in the beautiful ways that you have, and I will always, always cherish this beautiful moment. I promise to love and respect you fully. I promise to provide for and protect you through times of challenge and need. I promise to be faithful, honest, and open, to devote myself to your every need and desire. Most of all, I promise to be the man you so fell in love with. And thank you, Jesus, for the blessing you have provided me in Chris-Ann. I love you." Crickitt's self-created response filled my heart with thanksgiving and love. "Kimmer, I love you. Finally, today is here, the day I give you my hand in marriage. I promise to be faithful to you, to love you in good times and bad, and to be equally ready to listen to you when you need to share. I promise to be open and honest and trustworthy, and I promise to support you each day. I'm honored to be your wife. I'm all yours, Kimmer, and I love you." After we made our vows, the pastor asked my best man, Mike Kloppel, for the ring. Mike reached under his coat, but instead of pulling out the ring, he pulled out a black, freshly polished baseball glove. Mike handed me the glove. I put it on and signaled to Crickitt's dad, who gave me a big grin, stood up, and tossed a baseball up to me. I caught it, flipped the glove over my shoulder to Mike, and peeled back a square piece of white tape on the ball. There, inside the ball, was Crickitt's wedding band. Since a love of sports had brought us together, I figured it was only appropriate to mark our common interest in an unforgettable way. The new Mrs. Kim Carpenter and I went to Maui for our honeymoon, and when we returned, we settled down in Las Vegas, New Mexico, just as the new school year was getting underway. I started working with my baseball team, and Krickitt dove into her new life with the same enthusiasm, spirit, and faith that had made her such a great saleswoman. I had the luxury of still being in my same town, at my same job, but my new wife had to start all over in a brand new environment. That was no problem for Krickitt. Before long, she had become the team statistician, informal snack bar overseer for college games, and instant volunteer wherever she saw a need. Krickitt also took a position as an exercise technician in Northeastern Regional Hospital's Center for Health and Fitness, a community fitness center on the campus of New Mexico Highlands University, where she designed exercise programs to help people reach their individual fitness goals. Her friendliness and gymnastics experience made her an instant hit with both the other staff members and the clients. We decided that Thanksgiving would be a perfect time to make our first visit as husband and wife to visit Krickitt's parents in Phoenix. On Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, the night before we left, Krickitt and I had a quiet dinner and then sat snuggling on the couch in front of the TV. I had my arm around her, and she leaned her head on my chest. With no warning, she looked up at me and asked, "Are you happy, Kimmer?" I couldn't resist the urge to kiss her before answering. I can't imagine how I could be any happier. And I kissed her again.